Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday night live stream here on Kicking the Seat. Typically, we look at brand new films out in theaters, but we're doing the exact opposite of that. We are flashing all the way back to 1959 to William Wyler's Ben-Hur, starring Charlton Heston. It won 11 Academy Awards that year, including Best Picture. And strangely enough, it's got a connection to the film we talked about last week, Wuthering Heights, the Emerald Fennell adaptation. I didn't care for it, but we also kind of discussed a 1939 film, an early adaptation, which was directed by William Wyler. So 20 years after he did that, he brings us one of the best motion pictures of all time. And I can say that confidently, having just seen it for the first time, finishing this very afternoon. Whoa. So I'm excited to talk about this. This is another blind spot that I was happy to check off my list. I couldn't be more thrilled to discuss it with Earth's Mightiest Critics. So I am Ian Simmons. You'd know that if I actually put up the names of everybody here. Yeah,
there we are.
Sorry, I am Ian Ben-Hur. No, I'm Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists, Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree, and David Fowley of Keeping It Real. Gentlemen, welcome. I'm very happy to talk about this movie tonight. And also, I'm happy because I got to see this on a really cool new 4K transfer, courtesy of Warner Brothers, which also, this is, WB gets a lot of crap sometimes because their discs are hit and miss. Sometimes they have a lot of extras and sometimes they don't. This one has a ton of them. So if you're a Ben-Hur fan, there's a lot to dive into. They also came out with recently All the President's Men on 4K, which is a bit more of a grab bag, I guess. But you could check that out too. And Pat McDonald and I actually discussed that on an episode of There's Nostalgia Like Nostalgia years ago. So I should probably revisit All the President's Men and see if I still feel the same way. Who knows? But we're here to talk about a different movie, a historical epic, a biblical epic, which, frankly, I knew nothing about this movie going in, so I had no idea that it was, in fact, a biblical-inspired epic, and it surprised me. Jeff, you had mentioned one scene kind of in passing, and you told me what happened in it or what the point of the scene was, but I wasn't prepared for when that scene actually showed up on my screen. And that was some of the most powerful 3 minutes I think I've ever seen in any film. And it has nothing to do with the world famous chariot race. So we're going to get into all of it tonight here on the show. We will be talking spoilers, and also we're going to be taking your comments and questions, but as unfortunately I have to do nowadays, I have a disclaimer about comments. Only respectful and or relevant comments will be read on the show. If you're dropping in to troll, insult, or post nonsense, don't waste your time. We won't be wasting hours. And I must remind you, these are not the BAFTAs. So, Jeff.
That was very Tourette's of me, wasn't it?
There you go. Jump in, Jeff. Give us the synopsis, if you would, if you can. Don't go on for 3 hours and 45 minutes as this movie does, but the condensed version of Ben-Hur.
Shouldn't we start with an overture?
Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, wait.
Dun, dun, dun.
Here, wait. Jeff,
yes.
Before we get into it, though, I'm going to put you all to the cinephile test. Who skipped the overture and the midsection?
Are you kidding me?
And who watched the entire film? Did anybody skip?
No skipping here.
I did.
Awesome. All right. We get to keep our cinephile badges.
Scores ever, but we'll talk more about that
as
we get into it. But long story short, or hopefully I can make this as truncated as possible, but technically this is a remake of the 1929 silent movie that Ian mentioned early on. And one of the assistant directors of that was actually William Wyler. So sort of coming full circle to become the main director of it. The screenplay was from Carl Tunberg, based on the best-selling Lew Wallace novel called Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. And as Ian said up front, it stars Charlton Heston and Stephen Boyd, Jack Hawkins, Hea Harriet, and Hugh Griffith. The plot is basically in sort of old Jerusalem. Judah Ben-Hur, a wealthy Jewish prince and merchant, lives with his mother Miriam and younger sister Tirzah. They have a steward, and the steward has a daughter named Esther that they all live with, and they're pretty happy. And then one day, Judah's Roman friend from childhood named Masala returns to Jerusalem as the commander of the army, and he in full embraces Rome's glory and imperial power, even though Judah remains more devoted to his faith and the Jewish people's sense of freedom. Unfortunately, there is an accident that happens during a sort of parade to honor Messala, with one of the tiles from the roof of the Ben-Hur house coming off, and Messala, who's got a little bit of a thing, I think, competitive thing against Judah already, and sort of the differing ways of sort of seeing the world, decides to arrest the family of Ben-Hur and put them in various prisons. The mother and daughter are sent to the prison in the city, and Judah is sent out to be sort of on a slave waltzing through the desert. From there, it goes into many sort of different sort of set pieces and pieces of the journey of Judah Ben-Hur. Interestingly enough, though, if I was going to say, before you kind of get into what this movie really becomes about, is it's a little bit of a revenge tale, because we watch Judah in the normal situations, and we've seen plenty of adventure movies like this, not even that far off of, say, something like The Dark Knight or John Wick, where you might have somebody who goes out, and then how do they come back to sort of get back at the person who's given them this life of utter hell. But this is much more than that, but it's funny because it starts out that way as Judah goes through the desert, and then he's a ship galley's rowing slave, and then he becomes, sort of the hired employee of a sheik who wants him to race the horses back in Rome, and then that comes full circle with him racing against Marsala in one of the big chariot races, which is, of course, one of the all-time greatest adventure scenes. But that's essentially the plot in a nutshell. And from there on, I think we can hit the bricks, or hit the dust, as it were.
Very, really well, concise synopsis there.
You.
Well done. One thing I want to pull over, we do have a comment.
Oh no.
Well, yeah.
Maybe it's good.
So Jimmy Myers, this is a good point. It's about the comments disclaimer. So no comedians allowed.
Very good.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying you can be funny, but you got to be on topic, and you can't be insulting either to the people on the panel or different groups of people, shall we say? Because in the last month or so, we've had some folks dropping in with some not very flattering things. I think a good place to start here is the relationship between Judah Ben-Hur and Messala, because they were childhood friends, and they were kind of separated. And Jeff, as you mentioned, Judah is now a prince, and Messala is now, he's a tribune of Rome, and they are the exact opposite. They're about as far apart politically as you can get, especially because Rome, through the course of several speeches by several of these sort of lieutenants of the empire like to share, they are bent on conquest and assimilation, and basically the kind of the polytheistic boot of their own version of justice. And so at the same time, you've got this, the movie starts out with the birth of Jesus. There's like this whole, after the overture, which goes on for several minutes, you've got this prologue chronicling the birth of Christ. You've got one of the wise men, Balthasar, who shows up, throughout the rest of the film. Mm-hmm. But we flash forward from the birth of Jesus out in that manger to 26 years later, coming to meet Judah Ben-Hur. And these parallel stories intersect in very clever ways throughout the rest of the movie, culminating in, I think, one of the most beautiful and kind of hopeful endings in a film that I've ever seen. For a movie about revenge, I can't say that I've seen one that is quite like this, especially because the lessons and the teachings of Jesus and what would become the early church, sort of introducing these ideas of forgiveness and letting go of vengeance, and the idea of kind of giving up vengeance to a higher power to deal with the people that have wronged you, in their own time. It's something that's kind of unique, and that might sound kind of hokey and tree huggy and boring, but this is one of the most exciting movies I've ever seen. And the person who learns that lesson about vengeance learns it very late in the picture, after there's been a lot of tragedy, a lot of violence, and a great, cool horse race. So let's just do a quick around the room, because I'm always curious about these things. I have already said that this was the first time seeing it was yesterday and today. It is 3 hours and 45 minutes, so I divided it up between a couple hour blocks each day. But Jeff, when did you see Ben-Hur, and how many times have you seen it?
I've probably seen it about 15 times. It's one of my favorite movies. I find it the most inspirational movie I think I've ever seen. And I think I first saw it when I was probably 10. It left a great impression on me. I was very heavily into Sunday school then and sort of youth camp and things like that. I was also president of Senior Youth Fellowship. Not that I'm making any kind of claim on being that good of an egg, but I was very into the stories, and I've always sort of found this movie to do two things brilliantly that still stays with me even now, how many decades later. And that is that while I think it is a very positive story about the Christ and all that, it does it from a vantage point of somebody else being affected by Christ. And I think that's a very key part of this, that it seems in Hollywood, and sometimes not always, but it's a little bit hard to sort of capture that character and that sort of ethos, I think, as a traditional movie story. I think it works better when people are affected by God, people are affected by the church, people are affected by Jesus. And I think this is one of those examples that gives truth to that claim. The second thing that I really liked about this is, while there is plenty of, sort of biblical ideas and almost scripture-like lines of dialogue in it, it still by and large leaves it to the person to have to come to their own time and their own conclusion on how to use what, dare I say, are the gifts around them. And that could include family or physical health or lessons or, education, even benefactors. There's two benefactors in here that are greatly helpful to Judah, and yet they don't help him entirely. It's still a journey. One is the Octavian off of the ship, played by the great Jack Hawkins, and then, of course, the Sheik who hires him to be the chariot race. And yet it's still about you sort of finding your relationship with the better part of the world, those in your sort of full in circle, as well as God. And I think that's putting a lot of the onus on us, which I love. It's not just like, well, I pray and it all happens. No, not quite. You can pray, but you have to be a little bit responsible for yourself too. And I think this film does a magnificent job of that. And I walked out the first time I saw it was, I think, a church setting where they had shown it for us, and it kind of blew my mind. And every time I've seen it, I always feel the same way. I also must say, and I'm going to apologize in advance here, if I tear up during this, I apologize. Not that I have to, but some of this stuff is so moving to me. I was crying when I was watching it most recently to talk about it for this show, and it still has that effect.
Well, I'm glad you are so moved. I think we're kind of in the same boat there. Mr. Fowley, tell us about your experience with Ben-Hur.
Well, we go way back. We went to school together. Oh no!
Wow.
Yeah,
that explains the beard. I got it. No.
Right? Yeah, it's a biblical beard. Yeah,
it's a very biblical deal.
I grew up, having a knowledge that Ben-Hur is kind of it's a biblical epic, but it's also not like Ten Commandments, not like King of Kings or something like that. It's something very different. And I guess I only recently kind of appreciated what it was doing, what the story was doing, probably because I recently watched it with more mature eyes and everything. I had honestly, and it probably wasn't until this 4K release that I really had a real appreciation of it. And there were parts that I didn't remember, that now deliberately sitting down and watching it all, I was, quite impressed. But yeah, I always knew that it was a big thing. It was an epic. It's the epic of epics, right? And it's not necessarily epic because, I knew that it was always called like an epic, but it was one of like the original ones. Okay. So, obviously you look at the chariot race and you could easily look at the pod race, Phantom Menace. You look at, So many, this movie was very influential on so many other movies, even like Ridley Scott's Gladiator. So to watch this being the original one and then to see what it does with the story of Christ is really clever and inspiring and totally not preachy, which is really cool. And I think, I would love to see, like, this 4K is really impressive. Like the colors pop, it's just kind of crystal clear. It's pristine. The sound's great. And I hope that it gets more people watching it. Like, I was watching it at home and my wife was like, "What are you watching? Some old movie?" I'm like, yeah, it's like, and she, I don't think she even knew that Ben-Hur is basically also telling, the story of Christ in a roundabout way. She had no knowledge. And so, growing up, like I said, I caught parts of it, like, on the ABC movie of the week or weekend movie where they showed.
My gosh, was that a week-long thing or what?
They used to do it at like Sunday.
It was often shown on Easter.
It was often shown on Easter, and sometimes it was like Sunday and then Monday night or something, and then, or it was like, family classics, and it was like all day Sunday afternoon with Frasier or something. But yeah, knowing the history of it now and watching it, I have a better appreciation for what it meant and how it went about doing what it was setting out to do. And just the cultural impact. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Mike, how about you, sir?
Well, I've seen the movie a whopping 2 times, but I remember growing up that it was one of those movies everyone talked about, and as a cinephile, I wanted to see it, but then I saw its length, and it just felt quite daunting, and then eventually I just, due to happenstance of not having seen a particular film, watching it for the first time, and it's incredible how it holds up, because it's a biblical movie that it doesn't matter how you feel religiously. It's about the lessons that it teaches that makes it so endearing. It's about how Judah Ben-Hur is a man who reaches out to other people. And that's why Jesus reaches out to him and gives him water so he can go on and this, and help other people and save his family, and and the amount of acts this movie goes through is incredible, because the movie is almost 4 hours, 3:45, and and it doesn't feel like it drags. Like, there's not a single scene where I'm like, okay, they could have trimmed this, or okay, I already got what this point was. Each scene works beautifully. Like, this is the movie that is the epic that actually saved MGM Studios when people were gonna go watch movies on television, and they weren't going to the theaters as much. Like, this was a reason to get butts back in the seats, because you do not see something of this scope on the small screen. Even today, I want to see Big Hur on the big screen. I never have. And of course, that movie, even the lettering, you got to see the thing on the big screen. So when it comes to movies that not only balances scale, but character and message and structure, it does it all perfectly. Like, this is the Oscar movie that Oscar movies aspire to be. And of course, many fail. Like, the closest thing my generation got to Ben-Hur was Lord of the Rings. And now, of course, they're doing whatever with Lord of the Rings, and there's the whole Hobbit thing. But, that's just how sequelization works. I don't think anyone's ever seen the 2016 Ben-Hur. But, yeah, this movie does hold up. It is a 4 out of 4 star film for me.
Excellent. I'm glad we're all in agreement. Now, sometimes that means the conversation can be really boring if we're all just cheerleading something, but there's so much to get into with this movie that I think it's going to be a pretty robust conversation. I've not seen the 2016 remake either. I don't know how you remake this film without a considerable scale, budget, effort, star power.
It was directed by the same guy who directed Mercy that came out in January.
That's right. I remember. Okay, because when that was, I haven't seen Mercy and I haven't seen the other Ben-Hur, but I remember that being brought up in relation to that movie. So, wow.
Mercy.
Yeah, that's the chimp one, right? The chimpanzee or something.
That's Primate.
Primate. Oh,
Wait,
oh, Mercy was Mercy. Okay,
Chair.
here's Mercy. We did a live stream on that.
Pratt in a chair.
Chris Pratt in a chair. Wow. So that goes to show how easily a film can slip out of my consciousness.
Yeah,
wow.
Chris Pine in the chair is Star Trek. Sorry.
That's right. It'd be great if they just swapped them in and didn't tell anybody.
Right.
So many Chris's, too many of them.
And now I'm just thinking of Chris Hemsworth in the chair when he's doing
he was
like
in
the
Star
Willy
Trek
Wonka
too.
shot. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow. All right. So it was already alluded to with the Jesus and the water scene. When Judah Ben-Hur is exiled into slavery and he's crossing the desert on this giant literal chain gang, and they stop in a town, and we see just from his back, we never see Jesus's face. We always see him either from the back or from the if he's facing us, it's from the extreme distance, or there's a really poetic moment of him when he's basically on trial towards the end, and this shaft of shadow is just like coming across his face and you can't see anything. But we see him sort of in his workshop, and he notices, hey, there's this group of prisoners coming through the town, and we're watching them pass through his window, again, through his workshop. He goes out to help Ben-Hur because he has fallen down out of exhaustion and thirst. Everybody else on that chain gang has gotten a ladle full of water, but he has refused because he, ticked off the wrong guy who happened to be his former best friend. So as he's laying there, in the sand, Jesus comes up with this ladle of water and gives him drink. And it's a double whammy of a scene. I was floored by this because you see Judah looking up, and he doesn't recognize Jesus, and he doesn't have any idea what his significance is, but he sees something, and his eyes are kind of shocked for a moment, like there's something there. And then the Roman soldier who'd been leading this caravan of prisoners comes up basically to say, hey, I said no water for that guy. And then we see Jesus stand up full into frame, and we see the soldier kind of smaller in the frame, and he looks. And the closest I can come to it is when Tim Roth sees the suitcase at the end of Pulp Fiction, and this gold light's coming out of it. And first he's shocked, and then his lip starts to quiver, and he just says, it's beautiful. And then he shut the case. That was the look on that Roman soldier's face. He was awed, confused, a bit scared. And then he started like looking around like, what was I doing? But Jesus just stands there. He never backs down, doesn't say anything. And the reaction of the actors who do see that face really sells what that means. And that's what I was talking about. Like this moment floored me. I'd not seen something that powerful and that subtle. Because today, of course, you're going to see his face. You probably have like laser beams shooting out of his eyes or something, falling on the ground and crying. But no, it was all very, very subtle and very cool.
Think of how hard it was as an actor to do that note. Like, okay, you're seeing Jesus, now go. Like, that's hard to do.
But see, I don't know what it says in the script, but my guess is what was probably intended for that, and I think what is certainly what William Wyler directed both gentlemen to do in responding to Jesus is there is a purity, and maybe there is a perhaps a kindness. No matter, there is a strength to this person's face and conviction in what he's doing that is transmitting, almost like a ethereal kind of warmth or something that the person can't qualify because they probably haven't seen it quite done that way or coming from a man's face that way. Who knows what that looks like? It's up to us to sort of fill it in ourselves. But that was also where I knew this was going to be a great film, and where William Wyler's direction was really something to be talked about. Grant you, the second unit really took over during most of the chariot race and some of those kind of adventurous big mise en scenes, or whatever you want to call them, sort of taking place, set pieces. But I think where Wyler does such a great job of this is he chose not to show Christ, not to assign an actor to it, probably with the idea that no actor could probably live up to trying to convey in our minds and millions of minds what that face may look like, even if we've seen it portrayed in paintings and such. The other thing I love about it, and you hit it, Ian, is that key moment where, this Roman, leader is, strutting around. I said, no water for him, all this kind of stuff. And then he's, about to bark at Jesus, and Jesus stands up in the frame, and the camera goes up with Jesus. So, the guard is over here small, and he just fills it. And it's just kind of the majesty of the better argument, right? Sort of eclipsing the frame, eclipsing this small man and making him seem even smaller. I thought that was such an incredible, simple, yet incredibly camera move that the director and the cinematographer worked out. And it's also helped, of course, by the introduction of the great music that Nicolas Shroja did with that, that sort of Christ theme, if you will, that dun 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 dun, which is kind of a very gentle counterpoint to most of the ba bum ba bum ba bum, kind of brass and trumpets blaring that most of the score is. But in that moment, it becomes almost like an angelic choir.
Yeah. Oh, David, you want to say something?
Yeah, watching that scene in its entirety probably for the first time, I'm kind of reminded how, in the Bible, a description of Christ isn't really found except like kind of in the Old Testament when they were actually prophesying about Christ. How, in essence, his appearance wasn't all that. It wasn't just because everybody was expecting the Messiah to be a king, and to be this, grand, person or whatever, how they usually expect kings to look. But he was, he was a carpenter, and, I think like Jeff said, I think it's a good decision on Wyler's part, not to show the actor's face, but also to show the actor who's seeing Jesus. To see them respond to Jesus is more important because it reminds you of how you respond to Jesus. When you think about it, it's when you are reading the Bible, and if it happens to penetrate you in a certain way or convict you in a certain way, it's because you're applying it and you're taking it into consideration. And the way I saw that scene was almost like that Roman soldier looking at Jesus. Jesus is almost like a mirror, and he's actually seeing himself for the first time through Jesus. Like, oh, this is how I'm behaving. This is who I really am.
It's nice.
I'm just going to back up and shut up.
That's very interesting because it kind of relates to something I think Jeff was kind of alluding to, which is what is this guy doing? He's denying water to a guy that he's trekking through the desert, which is one of the most unforgivable things you can do. And like, what kind of person does that? And in that moment, David, to your point, he kind of realizes, oh, I guess I'm the kind of person that does that. And he starts looking around. I thought it was kind of bewilderment, but it might just be shame. Like, can anyone else see what's going through my head right now?
Yeah.
Well, especially since he denies Judah the water, drinks it himself, and spits it out like it's nothing to him. Like he's so satiated, it's just a palate cleanser, and it's adding insult to injury. So I love that, David, that he's holding a mirror up, and I think Judah keeps looking back at him like I think he may have given up on humanity at that point. It's a little, maybe by today's standard, a little obvious, but Judah, when he's at his rope's end, not sure if he can even get up off of his knees and keep trekking, and all hope is lost. He's lost his family and everything. He says, God, help me, almost under his breath, but it's like his prayer. And the prayer is answered by this man from the town coming up who sees that he needs water, and he washes his face a little bit and cools in his brow, and then holds his head and gives him the water. and it's really careful. I mean, it's very caring. It's not just, well, here, drink this. He's helping him in so many ways, and he keeps looking at him. And I think he had almost given up on kindness in this brutal, unforgiving world where a simple mistake of leaning against the tile of a roof, is somehow an assassination attempt at Masala down below and then the Roman guard. And then suddenly a little piece of it is restored. And, they say God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of that going on here, but it's very interesting because I also love the fact that it assumes we know what's going on. Like, we hear that music, and it's the first time that music has really been used other than in the overture. And it's like, wow, that's a different cue. That's a really significant transition. And then maybe we know why, because they don't show him. And, and then when he stands and then you see the hair, and if you had any doubts, you can kind of put the rest of it together. But it's a magnificent scene. And I dare say, I think it's one of my favorite film scenes of all time.
Mine too, and I just watched it in the last couple of days, but it's already in that pantheon. One thing that I thought was cool, and there was a bit of a callback in a later scene in the film. I know we're kind of digging into this one instance in this very long movie, but this is kind of, I think, the thesis of what Ben-Hur is about. After Ben-Hur gets the water, I mean, there's a huge contrast between before he gets the water and then after he gets the water. I think more so than if he had just drank from that ladle and gotten a little bit of satiation, because when we see him walking away as part of the chain gang, he's walking upright.
Yeah,
he's got his energy back. He's not like got a pep in his step, but he's definitely changed in some way.
Yep.
And later on, spoilers, folks, the banner's down at the bottom if you haven't seen this movie, which you should. Ben-Hur ends up at the crucifixion. He witnesses the trial. He follows the kind of procession through the streets. And at one point he sees Jesus stumble, and he gets a good look at him because the audience has the benefit of knowing the significance of this man, but Ben-Hur doesn't. He keeps hearing rumblings about, there's this crazy rabbi who's going around preaching about forgiveness and how there's only one God and all this other stuff. And we can be, free through love. But he's got his own stuff going on. So he's on his own vengeance quest. When he intersects with Jesus on that trip, or not trip, but that journey with the cross, he sees his face. We don't see his face, but he says, I know that man.
Yeah.
And then Jesus falls over, and Ben-Hur is like right next to him, and he gets kind of pushed back by one of the Roman soldiers into a giant container of water, basically. And he's like, that's it. That's the guy. And he brings out the ladle to him, and Jesus drinks the water. And a similar shot, when Jesus is walking back up that hill, he's resumed his way. Of course, he's still beaten and bloody and whipped all to hell, but he's walking taller. He's not crumbling. Now, they haven't put the cross back on him yet, so that might have something to do with it, but it does speak to that sense of, oddly, he is also renewed by the person that he helped renew. It's like poetry. It rhymes. We've made one Star Wars allusion tonight, and if I had to describe Ben-Hur to someone who has never seen it and probably wouldn't watch it because it's from the 50s, it's like the Prince of Egypt meets the Phantom Menace by way of F1 with a little bit of Revenge of the Sith and a touch of Pulp Fiction, as we've already described.
Wow.
Now I want to get into the Revenge of the Sith thing, because I feel like George Lucas made 3 movies that were basically just Ben-Hur in space, but not nearly as good. The death scene between Masala and Ben-Hur is Anakin Skywalker on the table.
You were the chosen one.
Anakin Skywalker was a slave, and at one point Ben-Hur is a slave.
That's right,
That's
Mike.
true. He was involved in a pod race.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here it comes.
A soldier.
Yeah.
And
But
Masala could have been better than he was. He had the chance to become a great leader, and instead he chose to become a petty, vengeful, awful man. And maybe right up until the end, he missed that lesson. He doesn't tell Ben-Hur, Judah, about his mom and mom and sister, to help him. He tells him to spite him, like, you thought they were dead. I banished them to the valley of the lepers, a fate worse than death. The battle continues, Judas. The battle continues, and then he dies.
No, it's the race. The race goes
The race,
on.
that's right. The race
The
goes
race
on.
goes
But I'm sorry. The battle essentially. But you're right.
Maybe that's the tag for F2.
The race goes on. And
Well,
you get Sonny and Cher to the race goes on. Anyway, he goes to his grave, still being petty, still fighting. The sword is still in his hand.
Yeah.
Well, what I
And
thought was cool about that
an interesting take on the revenge thing, the revenge idea as well, Ian.
well, the chariot race, which I know we're jumping all around here, but I always thought this was, like the big, opening scene or something of this movie. Again, I had no context for Ben-Hur before watching it, but this happens like 2.5 hours into the movie. It's on disc 2, if that gives you any indication for folks watching on physical
I
media.
love that there's 2 discs, by the way.
I do too. It's a movie that cannot be contained.
It's like being the record to side B,
It's 3 discs
Yeah.
total. You get 2 for the feature and then 1 for the extras.
Yeah.
Just like the old days.
Yep. It'd be cool if it was on like a special like retro laser disc. Anyway,
With the wheels of a chariot.
Oh, man, can you imagine how many times you have to flip that disc over? Because like every 30 minutes, you have
cube.
to flip it. Yeah.
well, okay, so the chariot race through a long series of events, because a lot happens in this movie. Although there are only a handful of major like story points, and what I love is it's a giant contrast to movies of today, which all play out like video games. Okay, we got to go to this place to get this thing, and now we found it, we got to go get this thing, and it's just like side quest city. Ben-Hur unfolds with the natural narrative results of the inciting incident and the incidents thereafter. There's a whole subplot involving a leper colony that I did not see coming, and I think just you could look at it as like, oh great, it's one more thing to pad out this 3 hours and 45-minute movie, but it ends up underlining everything that's important about this story in a way that's completely unexpected and totally beautiful. But in terms of the chariot race, Ben-Hur, in his slavery, he spends 3 years as a rower on this ship for the Roman Empire out in the sea with like dozens of other men. They're shackled at the bowels of this boat to their oars, and there's a sub level for when one of them gets tired, they bring someone up from the pits of that ship.
Bro
to
got in
replace
shape.
them. What's that?
Bro got in shape.
Totally did. And the captain of that vessel was he sits in a chair and watches over all these guys as they're just killing themselves. But he just looks at Ben-Hur, and Ben-Hur is staring and like drilling holes into this guy's soul with hatred and vengeance. And we find out later that he's thinking of Masala with every single stroke of his oar. The ship gets attacked. There's a giant war, and the captain unshackles Quintessarius.
Yeah.
He unshackles Ben-Hur for whatever reason. It's not really clearly stated aside from divine providence. So Ben-Hur is able to break free, whereas his compatriots are shackled to the boat. He gets the key. He starts freeing people as the water's flooding in, and then things are collapsing all around them, and stuff's catching on fire. Ben-Hur and Quintessarius get on a makeshift piece of wood, like driftwood, and they're saved. They're fine. Quintessarius gets back to Rome with his new best friend, and says, "You're going to be my champion chariot rider." And we flash forward some amount of time. Ben-Hur is now a champion horse rider. He's done 5 competitions and won all of them, and now he's got a new one coming up against his old friend Masala.
Well, we also have to mention that within that time period, he was also adopted by Arius.
That's true.
And the reason that Arius is alive and on that boat debris is because, yes, he freed Ben-Hur, but Ben-Hur also jumped in after him and saved Arius and brought him onto that boat debris.
And saved him a number of times because he kept because of the shame, he kept trying to kill himself.
That's right.
because they get rescued by a Roman ship, and at first they can't tell because it's far off in the distance if it's an enemy ship or a Roman ship.
Right.
And Arius is like, it'd be better if it were an enemy ship because I can't stand the shame. It'd be better for me and for you.
Right. So that whole act of saving him and then keeping him alive when it's just the two of them out on the ocean, it reminded me back to him meeting Jesus and getting a drink, getting satiated, and also being inspired to actually, probably, at least in my eyes, Ben-Hur's probably from that momentous encounter that, okay, that's the type of person I want to be. Mm-hmm. So whoever he's around, yes, he has vengeance in mind. Yes, he really desperately wants to get back and together with his mother and daughter. But I feel like that there's after that Jesus encounter, he was like, you know what? I need to be like that to whoever I can, whenever I can. But yet he's also human, and he's struggling with the whole vengeance and family reunion thing.
Well, there's some interesting paralleling going on throughout this movie. I think he sees in the Roman that there is something there besides just cruelty. And maybe that's why there's a little bit more of a connection. Or maybe he hopes that the Rome can be saved. Like this person seems to have a little bit more to him. Maybe Rome doesn't have to go the way of Masala is sort of wanting to direct it. They're better than that. And then, of course, the lines parallel, like row well and live, because that's what he told Judah on the boat. And then when, he's now his prisoner on the driftwood, who's in charge now. There's a lot of that kind of paralleling going back and forth with the power struggle and where Rome is, where the Jewish population is, as you referred to early, Ian. And I think all the while the undercurrent of imprisonment is there, and what is real hell. There's a certain part of hell that Judah has gone through, certainly. But it's probably not as the hell that his mother and sister, who were frail, just innocent people, have gone through. And I don't want to get ahead of myself because you may have other thoughts, but that I think is in some respects, the ace in the hole or the ace in the hand of this movie. Some people might say, oh, it's that great action sequence of 20 minutes for that chariot race, which is unbelievable when you see it, and to know that they really shot it. There were no horses injured. The one mistake was where the stuntman goes flipping over the thing, and Charles.
Oh, we'll talk about the horse race in a minute, but finish your other point.
No, but I just think that the thing that grounds you the whole time is that actions have consequences, and the way you choose to live continues to roll on in choices you've made. And Marsala's choice to continue this vengeance, after the mother and daughter are found with, lepers in the prison cell, they take them to the leper colony, and what's her name? I'm blanking on the name right now.
Esther?
Yeah, Esther. Excuse me, Esther does not want him to know. It would be easier for him to think that they were dead, and just the drama that adds. And yet, this isn't resolved either. There's still this we're carrying. I don't know. For me, that was where it just grabs you and holds you and doesn't quite let you go, even though some of that is just horrific.
Well, and there's, Esther was kind of put in a tough position because it was the mother and sister who didn't want Judah to know about their condition. She was all for like, oh, great, you're back. I can see you're in a terrible condition. We got to get, Judah here. He can probably help. Mm-hmm. But they're like, no, there's no way. We want him to remember us as we were. That's a whole other section we'll hopefully get to, because again, I don't want this to be a 6-hour show. But what was fascinating to me was the callbacks are aplenty in this movie, but very cleverly done. Early on, there's when Judah and Masala are reunited as adults, they have this, I guess, competition going back to childhood where they're fling these spears down the hallway and try and land in the intersection of a cross, which was very interesting. Later on that ship battle, I was amazed because I've seen so many versions of this in other movies, but again, not quite done like this. Ben-Hur saves Arius, Arius is fighting someone, sword and shield and everything. There's someone who is about to strike a blow on Arius. Ben-Hur picks up a spear and impales the guy. Arius doesn't seem to notice. Now, granted, he's fighting like two other people as this is going on, but there's not a moment where Ben-Hur says, "I saved your life," or Arius looks up and says, "You saved my life." No, it's just something that the audience is aware of, and Ben-Hur is aware of, but he doesn't use it as a point of advantage, even though he very well could have, or maybe he didn't think it would make a difference because this guy was a jerk. He didn't know there was more to him at that point. But anyway, flash forward to this chariot race. There is the guy that Jeff, you mentioned before I think we started talking, the actor Hugh Griffith played Sheik Idarim, who was he's a character, all right.
Yes.
One bit that the kids might
kind
call
of the comic relief, if you will.
Right. He was an actor who was playing a Middle Eastern sheik. I do not know that he was of that heritage because he was very clearly wearing crazy dark makeup.
Yeah.
To the point where it becomes almost comical to see from scene to scene. Like sometimes he's a shade lighter, sometimes he's a shade darker. The stuff on the cheeks and the forehead does not match what's going on underneath the beard, which is, it's just strange to think about because this isn't a situation where all the people of color in the background are all in like blackface or whatever. It's a multiracial kind of background cast. It's just that the speaking parts, the big meaty roles, because this is 1959, they're not going that way. At least I assume that's the reason. I could be wrong, but this guy, he befriends Ben-Hur because he's respects him as a championship racer, and he even helps him get some revenge on Masala by convincing Masala and his Roman compatriots, hey, want to place some bets on this race? 4-1, and we're starting off with 1,000. So that's all. It's all beautifully set up. Also, very much in the vein of Phantom Menace. But when we get out onto that race, we've got Ben-Hur with his beautiful, pristine white horses, representing maybe like the dove or the purity of the Holy Spirit. And then who do you have? You've got Masala showing up with his jet black steeds, and he's got a chariot that is red and black, and he's just chariot. What's that?
A Greek chariot.
A Greek chariot with, again, another Phantom Menace detail. George, I'm pointing my finger at you, sir. The little blades, the saw blades that come out of the side of that chariot.
Also,
that was clearly a Sebulba move, huh?
They also filmed that in Greece, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
And Gladiator, a million movies have done it.
And Bugs Bunny. Oh.
Yes, but
he's not a good
movie
fair fighter. He doesn't fight fair.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think what was crazy, and this is where I was getting back to my Anakin Skywalker analogy. There's very clearly this good and evil, this God versus the devil kind of race, and at the very throughout the course of this, it's very neck and neck. As you mentioned, Jeff, there was apparently a horrible incident with a stuntman. It's jaw dropping watching this because it doesn't look like a whole bunch of blue screen or projection or anything like that. They are on a real. Was this a set or was this a location? I don't. Where did they film this?
It was a set and a location.
Okay.
Yeah, it was filmed in Cinecittà, where whatchamacallit, the famous Italian director made a lot of his movies.
Mastroianni?
Yes.
Yeah, no. And they actually built up this entire sort of coliseum for this scene.
Fellini.
And they had Fellini. Sorry, they had two different crews that were like sort of in charge of actually storyboarding and creating it. Wyler was smart enough to say, I don't do action, so I'll let these action people show me what you're doing. And they did it and it worked out well. But I just wanted to say there was a scene where they were filming and there was a bump or something, but the stuntman was popped over outside of the chariot onto the front and they yelled cut. And apparently Wyler and Heston said, we should use that. That's so happy accident, as they would often call it in our business, or the movies today. When something happens, it's a nice little gift of unexpectedness. And I guess it was Heston who came up with the ideas like, well, what if Ben-Hur just climbs back into it, and you have this big dramatic moment where he climbs back in? So they were able to use this great accident.
Great editing.
The stuntman did not get hurt. It was wonderful editing. That was one of its 11 Oscars. And it just makes it all the more authentic. And, there's not a lot of sped up film there. You can see it just a little bit in one or two places, but by and large, they managed to choreograph it so it doesn't look like it's too out of sorts. And it's also amazing too. This is the restraint of Wyler. It's very little score during that. The actual sound effects and the sound design of the audience and the crowd and the horses and the rolling wheels and stuff, that is the soundtrack there, and it's not overly enhanced by an underscore.
And the beautiful thing is, if you watch this like on a surround sound, you can hear those chariots and that crowd through each speaker, and it's something that you'll get with a big screen experience that you'll never get on the little screen. But they do a great job with this 4K disc. But the funniest thing is that movies since Ben-Hur have felt like a downgrade. Like if you look at the chariot scene compared to even the scenery in Gladiator, it's not as good. Although Gladiator is all right, but then look at Gladiator 2, and once you get into the shark tanks and all that shit, I'm sorry, all that stuff,
Well, I mean, that's the thing is it's because of the time. I mean, they didn't have computer generated effects back in 1959. So it's quite ambitious to say we're going to film a chariot scene and we're going to do it with real horses, real actors. One of the great things, I know we keep talking about the 4K, but I think it really is, it underscores how great a job on the restoration WB did with this, because at no point does it look like, oh, I'm watching an old movie. It looks, aside from the actors of that time sort of had their own unique look. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. They look like classic Hollywood actors, so that's a little bit jarring. But otherwise, it looks like it could have been shot today. And so when you see Charlton Heston, whipping these horses or trying to get them to move, and he's Ben-Hur is up against Masala, and you see the rigged blades like tearing the chariot wheels to pieces. You're like, how am I? It's so well put together. You're wondering, how am I watching this? How did they get the cameras to like weave in and out and capture all of this? Because there are huge cameras at that time. It truly is movie magic. But even if you're not watching it from a cinephile's analyst point of view, it's still really thrilling in a way that it's kind of like the movie F1. It's like, yeah, they're driving around a track in circles. What's the big deal? They're kind of doing the same thing in Ben-Hur, but it's constant action, constant danger. And I'll say, when Masala gets taken out, he gets wrecked and trampled. And when he's like just laying in the dirt, I thought for sure that they were going to come around the bend and just like run him over one more time for good measure. But
it's Wile Coyote.
Right.
Back up that guy.
Then one of the horses pees on him. Yeah.
that was probably in the 2016 version. I wouldn't be surprised.
But it's the Naked Gun version.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. But when we get to see him like laying there in the dust, and the actor like lifting his head just barely, and you're wondering, is this his death scene? No, his death scene comes later. He's in a tent. All these people are attending to him. They're like, okay, we have to move you now if you're going to survive. We have to act, and they have to cut off his legs. And Masala's like, no, I've called for Ben-Hur. I'm not going to let him see me as half a man. I want to see him before you do anything, and I don't care how long it takes. And Ben-Hur magically appears, and they have this final kind of confrontation, and it is very much an Anakin and Obi-Wan situation, to the point where what was the name of the actor who played Masala? Stephen Boyd, terrific actor. He's he's not burned up in the way that Anakin is, but he has that same kind of like black, charred, dirty look, and he's kind of bleeding in different places, and he's kind of like curled up like Anakin was, and he's gonna have his one or both of his legs removed. There are parallels there, but I love that last line he delivers, "The race goes on."
Mm-hmm.
That's a metaphor. It's maybe ham-handed, but it's also kind of beautiful, because in that, as we established, he's wearing devil colors. He is representing the force of evil versus the force of good in that chariot race. And when he's talking about the race going on, that's Satan basically saying, you've won this time, but I'll be back. And you just wonder about the poor soul of that guy and what he's about to face in the afterlife. And his is really a tragic story, because he is a bit of a bastard, but you can see how, because Judah Ben-Hur loved him, throughout his life, and even to the point where they were having disagreements, he wouldn't give up on his friend until his friend actually betrayed him and sent him into exile. You have to feel like there's some, again, going back to the Star Wars analogy, some good in him. I can feel it. And I think that's ultimately what strengthens and sours Ben-Hur's quest for revenge, is like, if even the person I think is the best person in the world can turn against me, then what chance does anybody else have? Because he was the best and everyone else kind of sucks.
Yeah.
I also think he starts to. Oh, go ahead, Kevin.
If all Masala did was send Ben-Hur into exile, I think Ben-Hur could have handled it. But the fact that he sent his mother and sister away, and the fact that eventually they became ill and they were in the Valley of Lepers, that was really it for Ben-Hur. For him to do that to these people, the women in his life, who they did nothing to Masala,
and especially because his younger sister really looked up to Masala. She was kind of sweet on him, Well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the thing, is like, I think that Ben-Hur could have handled if it was just, if all this pettiness was targeted towards him, fine. But then you do that to my sister and my mom, I can't condone that.
It's also, I think, the sign of a really great director, that the choices that often make a good film into a great film are such choices as this. It's not a lot of time that Ben-Hur gets to sort of celebrate his victory. In fact, it's kind of a bittersweet one as soon as it ends, because his childhood friend is literally been all but killed during it. So how celebratory can that be? But then to turn it also into sort of its own victory for Masala, because as he says, the race goes on because I've now hurt you. It's almost like Khan, I wish to go on hurting you. It's like, I'm going to explode this even though I'm dead, but you won't get away from it.
Was that line from Hell's Heart, I stab at thee?
Yeah, that's right. It's Star Trek too, the Khan. Yeah. So it influences a lot of things, but and Judah's pretty upset. He's like, no, he can't believe it. Like, he's now, having to deal with the fact that, what he thought about his mother and sister is a fate worse than death. And, again, it's the director saying, let's do something here that is a little more ironic or a little more sophisticated, or keeps, dare I say, the race going, in the sense that we're not going to sit there and do a victory lap. This wonderful thing, he wins, he overcomes obstacles, is triumphant, and yet arguably he loses the race, because Marcella tells him this as he's dying, and Judah's left with that. And then the whole end, it sets up, with what are you going to do with that? And that's where I remember it being 10, I just was bawling, because, oh no, he's going to find this out. And then the scenes that come after that, I mean, geez, and this is where I also want to just quickly hand it to William Wyler and other you guys talk, but I love it when he's, following Ruth, who's going to deliver food to them, which is so good. She's such a good gal. Excuse me, Esther. Why do I keep saying Ruth? Esther. Maybe I'm thinking of Star Trek. Esther goes there. By the way, Ava Gardner wanted that role, and this is also where William Wyler was good. He wanted somebody who was unknown, and he cast this Israeli actress. I just
spectacular,
spectacular. It gives a little more authenticity. She's not quite glamorous, she's pretty, but she's not Ava Gardner, the way that would give it a little bit of throw it off a little bit, I think.
That's Haya Hararit.
Yeah, that's right. And she was that's right, Palestinian, and she was from making a living in Israel, and then she went to London and France and different places. But anyway, so he follows her, and she goes there, and he wants to go and see them, and she's like, no, you can't. And it's a far shot, and you see this big rock sort of in the foreground, and he's arguing with her in front of it. And then out of this cave, way in the background, you see the mother and daughter come out. It breaks your heart.
Yeah.
I mean, you are Judah at that moment, because we're seeing it too for the first time. It's like, oh my God. And then, they're asking how Judah is. We hope he's okay.
There's a really cool flip side of that too later on, where you see the camera is in that cave, and then we're looking up.
Yes.
And you see Judah kind of, with the blue sky behind him, and you see him at the top looking down, and then Esther's right in the foreground there. So it's just brilliant camera work and cinematography that it's brilliant, but it's also emotional camera work.
Yeah.
It's really
one of the few happy endings, because he does bring them back from leprosy, and they live on another day, and most people will go, oh, that's a BS Hollywood ending. But this is a movie about a guy who's been through hell, and then he comes back, then goes through hell again when he has to go to the Valley of the Lepers.
Mm-hmm.
But he keeps going, he keeps persevering, and he makes it in the end. And it's the fact that it's not just that a character is knocked down once, but twice in the movie. Yeah. And both are devastating times, yet he's able to keep going. And that's why it doesn't feel like the same old stuff.
But
to that point, Mike, when Esther and Judah decide to bring the mother and daughter with them to go find Jesus, I think they're thinking, well, if we can find this guy, maybe he can help them because he works miracles, and we've heard all these great things about him. They show up to the town, and the town is deserted because everyone has gone off to see the big show, the trial and the crucifixion. I was expecting that because they were along the side of the road, that they would come across Jesus on his way up to the hill, and he would reach out and touch them and heal them. But that doesn't happen. What does happen, Judah kind of leaves them behind and goes up, and then the water sequence we discussed earlier happens. At the very end of the movie, Jesus is crucified. There's the blackout, there's the storm, and then all this beautiful lightning. Probably the most amazingly photographed crucifixion sequence I've ever seen, because you're not showing Jesus, you're not hearing him utter his final words. Judah relates that he witnessed that, but we're hearing it from him and not Jesus. All these great obscured angles. There's an amazing shot where there's a lightning strike, and then you see a puddle on the ground, and in the reflection of the lightning strike, you see the crucifix with the Jesus on it, and it kind of starts to glow, almost like it's dissipating. It's incredible. But at the end of this,
blood traveling down from Christ's feet down the cross into the water. I mean, it's literally the cleansing of the blood of Christ, as it talks about, and that goes into the water, and of course, the water is just washing all over all of Rome at that time. So it's a metaphor, but it's a literal one. And I think that's where, it's kind of those who believe in faith, will have their sins washed away and sort of, in a different way. And that, to your point, Mike, is sort of, well, I think you buy that because it's all about sort of this belief. I also have to say just quickly, Ian, that I think it's extraordinary too, where Judah goes in there knowing that he will get leprosy. And that doesn't matter to him. And he picks up his sister, and she's like, no, don't do it. You're good. And he grabs her and holds her like he loves her. And I think Mike said it earlier, and it kept coming to me. And I was watching this last time, and probably every other time I've watched it too, but I forget. It's this humongous epic, but it's the most intimate of epics. Yeah. I mean, those kind of things, they're just as impactful, I think, as that incredible chariot scene. Right. And those moments just, if not more, they just get to you, and just leave me shaking. I mean, I was a little trouble getting through thinking about it when they're coming out of that cave and we're back with him, almost experience with him. It's just devastating. And yet those little intimate moments, we care because they were a good mom and sister and they don't deserve this and it's terrible. And yet they're still concerned about their son who's just been through all this himself and still isn't quite out of it.
Well, but the leprosy is cured at the end, where we've got Miriam and Tirzah in the cave, and they suddenly realize that they're cured. It's not any kind of like a grand gesture. And what was surprising to me was typically in the stories of Jesus healing people, he touches them.
Right.
But in this, it was just like his presence, like leaving the earth, reached out and granted this miracle.
And I would say it's their faith too, because they have started to be changed by what they've seen on the road to the crucifixion. Yeah.
Well, and that started with that seed was planted with Esther, who, as they are the leper colony is right near, it turns out, or not that far from, where the mountain of the Beatitudes,
Sermon on the Mount.
the Sermon on the Mount. So we get to see that whole sequence, and again, you got this massive crowd of like thousands of people going up this mountain. And you can see Jesus. He's very distinct, like this little white or almost like a cream-colored dot. Even in 4K, it's kind of hard to make out, but it's unmistakable. The composition and the context is beautiful.
When the camera flips and we see the Sermon on the Mount from behind Jesus, in the distance you see little Ben-Hur too, and it's just like once again they're like crossing paths. They're like, oh, okay.
And they do it with the parallels. That's the same kind of perspectives. Yeah.
I think some of the best Charlton Heston acting, I mean, he won an Oscar for this, Best Actor. Some of the best Charlton Heston acting is when he is at the foot of the cross, when he's seeing Jesus being crucified. I don't know if you guys were able to get into a lot of the special features, but Charlton Heston's son, who's also a director himself, he winds up reading a lot of these. They're called the Ben-Hur diaries that Charlton Heston kept, and so he was reading different moments. March 31st, 1958. And all sorts of like Charlton Heston kept a diary. We arrived in Rome and brought the whole family for 6 months and blah blah blah. But there was something about that he said in the diary, especially specifically pertaining to that scene. Basically, he was sharing, and I think it's also from his own reflection, going back, because he was there as a little boy in Rome, because he was with his family, and he would also get a ride in the chariot with Charlton Heston, as did Heston's wife. But when he's reading those diary entries, the journal entries, and reflecting, he points out to that one scene. He's like, this is at the point, I think that this was maybe the last day or some of the last scenes that were shot overall in the total film. And he's like, this is my father at his most fatigued. He was like, my father was totally exhausted during this scene. And it's so fitting, so perfect, because of course, that's how Judah Ben-Hur would be. He would be so exhausted after all of this. And then to see somebody else who's even more exhausted and fatigued and going through it even more so, you could see it on Heston's face. And a lot of people criticize Heston over the years for being kind of overacting and big and over dramatic. But he does some things here that's just spot on, right for the character, right for the moment, right for the role. And that's probably my favorite moment too, especially when you hear that about what his son says about that.
Well, that's beautiful. And I think that scene leads to, another great moment of acting, and also for the screenplay, when he comes back and he's talking to his mother and sister. He's like, his last words were, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." He's like, look, if that guy, kind of to your point, David, if that guy can forgive everybody for this show trial and for hating on him because he's trying to spread love and change people's lives, if he can forgive them for nailing him to a cross, then my petty beef about having to, be on a boat and losing my mom and sister who I've been reunited with, maybe I can put this behind me and just try and actually live a good life. I'm getting goosebumps. The one thing I want to
Can I
kind
build on
of
that for a second, Ian?
Oh,
Because
sure, yeah, please.
it leads to the curtain line. It leads to the last line of the film, which is Ben-Hur's Judah's line, and he says, and I felt his voice, take the sword out of my hand. That's the revenge movie. Finally, the sword is taken out of his hand. Any sense he has, like, I have to fight this because I'm angry, and here's a man who went through all that and can forgive his enemies, and that took the sword out of his hand. I love that. It's like it reminds us, oh, that's right, this is kind of a revenge film.
Yeah.
But he didn't win even after the chariot race. Now he's won finally by putting down the weapon.
The one thing I want to kind of end on, it's a bit of a downer note considering all the positives that we've had, and it's not a criticism of the film, but it's the one what I'll call the horror movie moment in this film involving Miriam and Tirzah, when Ben-Hur is essentially like, all right, I want my mom and sister. We need to find them. And I think Masala sends for them. And he's like, where are they? Nobody knows, because they've been locked away in the deepest, darkest dungeon for a long time. They go through this chain of people. They finally they find the jail where they're at. They find the guy who has the record and says, well, we can go down to this sub basement. If they're still here, that's where they'd be. Oh. And they make their way down there with the torch to this dank basement. They walk through a door. There's people calling out and pleading for water and screaming and crying. They go down past that, and they find a guy who's like, are they still alive? He's like, yeah, they're still alive. Well, what do they look like? I don't know. I've never seen them. He only knows they're alive because someone keeps taking the food tray through the slot on the floor.
Yep.
And when they open that cell, we don't get to see what Miriam and Tirzah look like. We see the one guy like draw back in horror, and he like bursts out of the cell, and the other guy takes the torch and goes in, and he's mortified, and I think he says lepers or leprosy, and that's our indication that things have gone horribly wrong. I thought that was where they were going to kind of leave it, but that opens the door to a great, this movie is a wonder, because that chariot race should have been the end of the film. And when you find out there's an hour left of the movie, modern audiences will start thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be Return of the King all over again with a whole bunch of false endings and filler nonsense. But it is some of the most powerful and creative storytelling in the entire picture, is how they redeem the tragedy of Miriam and Tirzah, and bring them out of leprosy and into the light and reunite with the family, and then finally ending up happy at the Ben-Hur homestead at the end. It is a movie that fights very hard to earn its happy ending, and it's one of the greatest films of all time, I think, for a reason. So I cannot find any faults in this movie. Maybe we'll end on that. Let's have a positive note. What's wrong with Ben-Hur? Anything?
Well, I'll give you one little just sort of cherry on.
I wasn't fishing for that, Jeff. I was hoping you'd say no.
No.
It's perfect.
Oh, okay, it's perfect.
Okay. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, I was going to say, if you just heard about this movie and some of these dark things that would happen, you might think it's a downer, but I think it is inspiring, not only in its message about perseverance and faith and humanity and all that, but William Wyler and his filmmaking partners have just the right amount of cheek in some of this. I mean, that score, which is very bombastic and big, and then also very kind of ethereal with the Christ theme, has some humor. Like when they're on that ship and the slaves are, the music matches their beat. That's the bass drum, if you will, the bass beat of that ba-dum, ba-dum, ba, and it's just a little funny that they're self-aware like that. There's also the great scene where they go into that town thinking that Christ is going to be there, and there's nobody. They've all left, and no, lepers. Somebody discovers them, and the man, the pauper who they just put a coin, the blind man in his coin in his cup, drops the coin out like, I don't want a leper's coin. Even though beggars can't be choosers, but he's going to be a chooser. I mean, it's just a brief thing, but there's that just gives a little bit of levity, so it's not just like such a death march.
It's funny you mentioned that little moment where he drops the coins out. In one of the other special features, I forget which one, but they're talking about a lot of the extras in the chariot scene, and it was kind of unexpected I mean, it was kind of in the script and kind of boarded out, but when everybody, all the extras came down into, the ground there where all the chariots are after Judah won, there's that quick scene, and it kind of reminded me of like the end of the Battle of Geonosis from Attack of the Clones. Is like there's this quick scene of this guy picking up Masala's helmet and like, woo! And he runs away with it. And they said that was not rehearsed at all. That was just an extra doing that. And like probably, somebody said like to this day, that guy probably still has the helmet in his family. It's kind of funny.
That is funny. I'm just glad Masala's head wasn't inside of it. Like,
right. It's like
okay, so we do have a few comments. I'm not going to read all of them because we did get some someone who was not around for the disclaimer at the beginning of the show. But I will say, let's see, Susanna Sinai 676. I hope I'm reading that right. It's a little far on the screen for me. It's the best. The race for Ben-Hur's soul. Yes. I'm going to read this one because it's just so bizarre. Synagogue of Satan says Yoki Burrito OG. I guess that'd be the opposite of Ben-Hur. So let's see. Wonderful cinematography. Yes. Santa agree. The way he crouches there. Some of these references I'm not going to get.
It was in the Valley of the Lepers when he crouches on the rock.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Until he feels the sword being taken out of his hands, which is what happens after the crucifixion. Yep.
Which Jeff alluded to.
Yep. Heston deserved the Oscar for that last scene where he climbs the stairs to his now healed mother and sister. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Exactly.
The movie.
Both. Par excellence. We did talk about the musical score. It is one of the best. Yep. Let's see. Never a downer. It's a wonderful film, uplifting, even if you aren't religious.
Mm-hmm.
And then, no need to apologize, Susanna. We catch up with the comments we tend to at the end of the show because, as mentioned, it's a bit of a minefield sometimes. But we do appreciate your contribution. So I think
I would like to add a little bit of Oscar trivia really quick.
Okay.
Really interesting about the way the Oscars played out that year is that back then, there's certain categories like art direction were broken down into black and white features and color pictures. Okay.
Wow.
So for art direction, the Diary of Anne Frank won, and for art direction color, Ben-Hur won. So it was broken down that way, and there were a couple of different categories like cinematography, black and white, Diary of Anne Frank won. Cinematography, color, Ben-Hur won. Costume design, black and white. Guess who won that year? Some Like It Hot.
Because they had to dress men as women.
But costume design, color was Ben-Hur. So it was really interesting the way it was certain things were broken down that way.
To build on that too, they had 13 nominations for Ben-Hur, and it only lost 2 categories. Both Stephen Boyd and Hugh Griffith were nominated for supporting actor. Only one could win, or at least only one won in that instance. And it lost screenplay. And the reason they think it lost screenplay adaptation was there was controversy about how much was written by whom and who got credit for it. Gore Vidal was one of the writers of it who made a lot of grumpiness about how much he didn't get credit for and what he contributed to it. And so there was this whole kind of like, well, we're not sure who gets this, but that often happened in those days. So those kind of things can sometimes prevent a movie from a clean sweep.
Yeah. So the other nominees for Best Motion Picture back then, obviously Ben-Hur won, but Anatomy of a Murder, Diary of Anne Frank, The Nun Story, N-U-N, The Nun Story, and Room at the Top.
I don't know that I've seen any of those others.
Yeah.
Maybe Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to mention at the... Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, nothing. I was going to make a dumb joke about like Ben-Hur losing to The Nun or whatever the hell it was called.
No, not The Nun. There's The Nun Story, because...
The Nun Story,
The Nun, I'm thinking of those Blumhouse movies. Yikes. But no, the one thing I thought was kind of interesting, a bit of detail during the whole procession of the crucifixion scene, was they had a decent mixture. Well, I thought a cool bit of realism that I hadn't expected. because there were people in that crowd who were upset at what they were seeing. And then in one particular close-up, I think it might have been involving Miriam and Terza, there was a guy who was sort of between them, I feel like, who was really into it. Like he was smiling like, yeah, this is cool. Yeah, because it was
extra.
Yeah, right. He was probably the guy who grabbed the helmet at the end, or in the chariot race.
Right.
But all right, well, we could make this an epic 3.5 hour plus conversation, much like the film we just discussed. But we're not going to, because I need to get to bed. It's been a long day, but I am thrilled that I got to talk about this amazing movie with you. Some people might call it recency bias because I just finished watching it this afternoon, but it's already on my list of my favorite movies of all time. I'm glad I own it. I will have to find an excuse to tell people, my friends and family, to come over and watch it with me, because that's a big prospect. But Earth's Mightiest Critics, it's been a joy. I'm Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat. We have Jeff York of The Establishing Shot and Pipeline Artists, Mike Crowley of You'll Probably Agree, and David Fowley of Keeping It Real. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for hanging out and talking about this amazing film with me.
Oh, we got one more comment.
Oh, wait, can I read it?
Yeah, you can.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. Suzanne. Thank you so much for this discussion. This is one of my most favorite films, and I always argue with anyone who will listen that it may be the best film of all time, the complete package. I cannot disagree with that. I'm still trying to think, was there anything wrong with this movie? And the answer is no, it's perfect.
I can't think of too many films that won Best Picture that you could not argue in favor of. This is a great choice, and definitely one of the top 2 or 3 best film choices ever by the Academy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, they held the record of most Oscars won until Titanic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, next week, I'm happy to say we're going to follow up a perfect epic with another, what is shaping up to be another perfect motion picture. People have been waiting for it. They've been talking about it. It is so anticipated that the studio is so afraid of anything getting out spoilery that they're not screening it for most critics groups. I am, of course, talking about Scream 7. We're going to talk about that next week. Date to be determined, but you better be here because it's going to be amazing. It's going to be the Ben-Hur of 7th installment slasher sequels. Anyway, if you like this live stream, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications and all that business. Please be sure to follow and love and cherish and watch all of Earth's Mightiest Critics. All their information is down below. Also, pick up, as we've mentioned tirelessly throughout this evening. It is kind of chilling, but it's also because there's a lot of great background information on this epic film in the 4K from Warner Brothers. So you can pick that up wherever you get your fine movies. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care.
Grab my chair.